Is there a culture war brewing in Canada? Is the Conservative government trying to use wedge politics to divide the opposition parties? To talk about this, we are joined by a panel of, well, I don't know how to describe them, two partisans, one neutral. We've got Tim Powers from the Conservatives, Dan Brock from the Liberals, and neutral pollster Nick Nanos. We want to make that very clear.
Neutral Nick.
Neutral Nick, there you go. So Tim, let's start with you, because the Conservative government is launching an attack on the CBC, has this past week launched an attack on the CBC, saying that it has liberal bias. What's really behind this? Are they concerned about this, or are they just using this to raise money? Because there's a lot of your core who do not like the CBC.
Well, I wouldn't say there's a whack of people that dislike the CBC. The issue comes from the fact that the CBC used a pollster, Frank Graves, who recently was reported to have given advice to the Liberal Party. That's fine and dandy. All the Conservatives are saying, look, you're going to use Mr. Graves, have Mr. Graves declare his bias. So we all know where we stand. You just did it here. You called me a Conservative, Dan a Liberal, and neutral Nick there. That's all we're asking for. But you know, this whole notion of the culture war is not something new. I would suggest to you, if you go back to the beginning of the Reform Party, that the Liberals, as a political tactic, have always tried to frame up whatever the Conservative entity is as out of touch, not connecting with Canada being something different. While they've been big father Liberal, they are for everybody in the country. This is just the latest chapter in the saga.
Well, Dan, what do you say about that? Because not only is there an attack on the CBC, which is good for the core, but there's issues now around abortion with this maternal health initiative that's going to the G8, as well as the long gun registry.
Right. I don't think this is so much an assault on the CBC as it is an assault on Conservative donors. I mean, essentially, that you mentioned it at the top, essentially this is red meat for the base of the Conservative Party. You make the comparison to the Liberals. Liberals tended not to go after third-party institutions when they were doing this attack. So I think there is, at the base of it, something that goes to the unsavory side of conservatism in this country when you're attacking the CBC, for example. And we all know that Frank Graves is if to live in this town and to know polling in this town, Nick would say this, Frank Graves is a very well-respected pollster. So to use him as a sort of a target to make the case that somehow the Liberal, rather the CBC is somehow a biased institution makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I'll get back to you, Tim, because I know you have something to say, but I want to ask Nick about the whole polling issue. You know, everybody sees things a certain way, but as a pollster, what does this do to the reputation of pollsters when Frank Graves is being attacked like this by the Conservatives? And how do you sort of maintain, you know, your neutrality?
Well, you know, in regards to Mr. Graves, I think a lot of it had to do with how he handled the situation. He could have handled it much better. Everyone recognizes that the work that the firm produces is good. Research is research. And as long as all the elements, the positive elements are in place and the quality is good, you know, usually the trouble is in the analysis and the interpretation, not necessarily the numbers.
Just to backtrack a little bit, Mr. Graves made some comments in the Globe and Mail to one of my colleagues, Lawrence Martin, about a culture war and saying that this is how the Liberals could play it by mounting a culture war against the Conservatives.
And I think a lot of this has to do with the language that he used. Like,
and he apologized for that, we should say that. Yeah.
Like from my perspective, from the numbers that we see out of our firm, I think we have to delineate between what I'll say hacks, flacks, and politicians, where there is a war, a culture war, a very acrimonious war between the parties and in the House, and average Canadians. There is not a culture war in Canada writ large. Canadians want kind of peace, order, and good government. They want people to get along, and they, at this point in time, actually, they want to focus on the economy and make sure that they have jobs and that their kids have jobs.
Okay, let's go to Tim. Are we a hack or a flack? I can't, anyway.
Well, we're in a sandlot now. We could have
politicians.
a great scrap in the sandlot with he said, she said, because you can go back and you'll recall you used to work at the National Post before you came over to this fine, venerable institution, the Globe and CTV. And Mr. Chrétien at the time, of course, was attacking the National Post as being a terrible, dirty right-wing paper, spewing violent venom of us rabid right-wingers. This is not different, but what we do have, though, Jane, perhaps it's called a culture war, is a fight over symbols, themes, symbols, and appeals. Nick will tell you, as a pollster, that's what Canadians look to and look at. And if you get your news from the CBC, and I think this is the point the party was trying to make, and you have somebody there who's purporting to be a reputable third-party person, unaffiliated with the party, then you as a viewer may look at what he says a little bit differently. What the party is saying is, CBC, tell us about him so you understand what his perspective is as you do with me. This is normal in politics, but these guys have been doing it for a long time. If anything, we're fighting back and saying, no, 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 let's call a spade or a liberal, as is the case.
Just fighting back.
I know, that's what we do, Dan, in the sandbox.
I mean, but it's the way I think that the
Right.
Tories have done it. The Tories were trying to get a committee, the Heritage Committee, to look at biases between, the CBC or the relationship between the CBC and Mr. Graves. There's a fundraising campaign now going,
Absolutely, an
anti-CBC.
aggressive one.
Yeah.
I mean, yet to have the temerity to stand up in this country today and espouse an opinion that's at odds with the Conservative government means you're going to become a target of the Conservative government. And we've seen this repeatedly over
'Cause that never
and over
happened
and
with the
over
Liberals.
again. But look at what's actually happening, what the government is actually doing on the maternal health issue in respect to the long gun registry. I mean, you mentioned this before. A culture war, no, but this government and this Prime Minister is trying to take the country in a particular direction. And it is a direction that is, I think, at odds with where most Canadians are at. I mean, the challenge for the Liberal opposition and the opposition parties generally is to raise the alarm on this. Criticizing the CBC is basically throwing up smoke to distract from the real issues as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but the polls, excuse me, the polls aren't showing that though, Nick, are they? I mean, the polls aren't showing that the Conservatives are doing well from this or the Liberals are doing well. Everybody seems to be static.
Well, it's interesting because, my key takeaway from all of this is the lesson of wedge politics and being very negative. And although it allows you to get an advantage over your opponent, from my perspective, like the culture war strategy, if anyone ever wanted to use it, is really just a recipe for minority government, not for any kind of sweeping mandate or breaking through to majorities. And when you look at prime ministers that have won sweeping mandates, it's not because they've been kind of petty culture war kind of battling their opponents, because they put forth a vision, it might be a controversial vision, and they've stuck to it and fought for it, and Canadians have decided to trust them and give them the mandate. And even when we rewind back to 2004, when Paul Martin kind of snatched victory from defeat, it was a minority victory,
Right.
even when he played the abortion.
Well,
card.
the one thing in your theory, I agree generally with your theory, but that theory only works when there's trust and appreciation of party. You do have, and I like the phrase, Big Daddy Liberal, Mr. Ignatieff trying to inherit that mantle there, the father of the nation, father knows best, though he's not really any Eddie Haskell type character, trying to purport this vision out there, but that doesn't seem to be connecting either, because you do have a brand problem, which goes back to some of the ways you've behaved in the past, and some of the ways you've behaved in the past is by maligning the party. Let's not forget it was the Liberal Party that brought this wonderfully inaccurate phrase, hidden agenda, to the national stage. And in every election, and this is, I think, what Mr. Graves was getting at, and whomever he was advising when he said, do this, do that, to get at that hidden agenda barometer, which has failed so miserably for you. You started to know four, and the Conservatives have done better every time.
We're becoming more partisan, I think, in the town. Tim likes to
That's
talk
okay.
about the
Growing,
Liberals.
Dan.
I like to
We're
talk
growing.
about
You guys.
I like to talk about the Conservatives. The truth is, the national stage right now, the Prime Minister is center stage on the national stage right now. What's clear is the message and the agenda that this government's bringing forward is not yielding them the kind of numbers that give you a majority government. You could say whatever you'd like about the Liberals. It's very difficult, as you know well, when you're in opposition, to grab the stage and to make your point. Prime Minister has all the tools of government at his disposal. He has a message, they have an agenda which they're rolling out. It is not getting traction with Canadians. It's not giving him the kind of numbers which can allow him to go to the polls and get a majority government.
But
That's
can I
the fact
quickly
of it.
respond to that
Quickly,
before Nick comes in?
yeah.
Because you have 26 and 27 in recent polls. I mean, your vision, if you call it that, lack of vision, is not appealing either. I mean, this is the opportunity. If we're to believe all the news coverage, it's terrible for the Tories, it's a rotten time, and you can't get above numbers that Stefan de Jong got, you have serious questions.
Last 30 seconds, Nick Nanos.
Yeah, but the reality is that you're tearing each other
Now
down
be careful,
and pulling
don't
each
get
other
into the
down
advice for
through
vision side
the
here.
negative. It's for both.
Yeah.
But what I'll say, the state of civil discourse is diminished. Everybody's numbers are going down. And I think there's an opportunity for a breakthrough moment from anyone who, leading up to an election that we know is going to happen, who's willing to put forth a vision, to fight for it, and to be consistently
And
behind
attacking the
Okay.
CBC is not the way you're going to do
Well,
that.
we're out of time, and you guys can caucus afterwards, maybe or maybe not. Tim Powers, Dan Brock, Nick Nanos, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.